23rd, 1994, a British music group called the KLF decided to burn 1 million British pounds in cash. This insane act of setting money on fire infuriated the British public, but as we'll get into, they thought this was the right thing to do. The KLF is a group consisting of two members, Bill Drummond and Jimmy Cauty, who both had fairly limited success playing in rock bands. Bill played guitar for a group named Made in Japan, whereas Jimmy was the guitarist for a band named Zodiac Mind Warp and The Love Reaction. But when Bill was 33 years old, he had a bit of a quarter-life crisis. In an interview, he said, "It was New Year's Day, 1987. I was at home with my parents. I was going for a walk in the morning. It was like bright blue sky, and I thought, I'm going to make a hip-hop record. Who can I make a hip-hop record with? I wasn't brave enough to go and do it myself, because although I can play the guitar and I can knock out a few things on the piano, I knew nothing, personally, about the technology. And I thought, I knew Jimmy. I knew he was a like spirit. We share similar tastes and backgrounds in music and things. So I phoned him up that day and said, let's form a band called the Justified Ancients of Mumu. Within a week, we had recorded our first single. The Justified Ancients of Mumu shortened their name to The Jams and made hip-hop music using a digital sampler while Bill was the MC. There was little, if any, British hip-hop in the mainstream at the time, so this was seen as an incredibly fresh and new sound. To a modern music listener, they sound like a poor imitation of the early Beastie Boys. Nonetheless, they were reasonably successful, and the only problem was that they heavily sampled other artists and did not bother getting those samples cleared. And for this reason, no label would touch them, and they were pretty much independent. Their debut album contained a song named The Queen and I, which heavily sampled ABBA's Dancing Queen. Needless to say, ABBA's label was not happy with the unauthorized use of their work, so tried to sue them. In response, Bill and Jimmy traveled to Sweden with a journalist in the hopes of meeting with ABBA and giving them their CDs. They didn't get to meet him, so instead, they stopped by a field in Sweden and burned the remaining copies of their records. It was the first of many pranks and stunts that they would pull throughout their career. They produced 2 albums as the Jams and sampled everything and anything, ranging from Whitney Houston to the Mission Impossible theme song. As well as hip-hop, they were always producing house and dance music, which was incredibly popular at the time. In 1988, they came up with a novelty song called Doctor and the TARDIS, which was their attempt to write a house music song based on the beloved British sci-fi show Doctor Who. Since it was a novelty song, it wasn't released as The Jam, but under the new name, The Time Lords. And incredibly, the song ended up giving them their first #1 single in Britain. The group was almost annoyed that having a #1 hit. It was a silly song they made, and out of all of their music, this was the one that was the most successful. In an incredible act of pettiness, they released a book afterward named The Manual, How to Have a #1 the Easy Way, which took aim at the music industry and gave a satirical breakdown of how you can get a #1 hit without having any real talent. Bill said in an interview, it was saying, if you want to have #1, you can have it. It won't make you rich, it won't make you happy, but you can have it. While many people saw it for the tongue-in-cheek book that it was, the Austrian band Edelweiss used the manual and ended up scoring a #1 hit in their native country with their song Bring Me Edelweiss. It was a novelty song that heavily borrowed from the ABBA song SOS and incorporated a lot of yodeling. It was basically the same formula used as Doctor and the TARDIS, and it worked. In 1991, they rebranded themselves as the KLF, which stood for Copyright Liberation Front, where copyright was spelled with a K. When they announced this change, Bill said, we might put out a couple of 12-inch records under the name the KLF. These will be rap-free, just pure dance music, so don't expect to see them reviewed in the music papers. And the music of the KLF was even better received than the Jams. Songs like America, What Is Love, and 3 AM Eternal became huge hits and were a fusion of hip-hop and dance music. It wasn't rap-free, but instead they hired actual rappers to do the rapping for them, and this produced a way better sound. By 1991, the KLF was the biggest selling singles act, not just in Britain, but in the world. But like before, they seemed to be dissatisfied with their success. They saw themselves as outsiders, but here was the music industry embracing them with open arms. The nail in the coffin for them was being invited to the Brit Awards, where they were expected to rub shoulders with Britain's biggest pop musicians. They decided that their performance for this event would need to be so distasteful that they would never be invited back. So, their plan was to leave the worst impression ever, and it went as follows. Before they went to the awards, they wanted to get their hands on a dead sheep. They got a hold of one from a slaughterhouse, and the plan was to dismember it in front of the audience and throw blood across the audience. They also hired the heavy metal band Extreme Noise Terror, who they hoped to use to perform a loud and abrasive cover of 3 AM Eternal on stage. However, Extreme Noise Terror were devout vegetarians, so were not on board with the dead sheep idea, so that part was abandoned. On the night of the Brit Awards, the KLF prepared for a night that the British music industry would never forget. They were invited to perform their club banger 3 AM Eternal, and, as planned, they brought on Extreme Noise Terror with them and shouted the lyrics for 3 AM Eternal over loud guitar and drums. And while performing, Bill takes out a gun and starts firing bullets into the audience. The bullets turned out to be blanks, and thankfully was another prank. The song ends and they leave the stage. As the curtain came down, an announcement was made on the VA. The KLF have now left the music industry. Bill and Jimmy had left the building, but when it came to announcing the award for Best British Group, the winners were the KLF. They anticipated this could happen, so they hired a motorbike messenger to collect the award for them. An after-party took place at the Royal Lancaster Hotel, and outside the building is where the KLF decided to dump the dead sheep. Later that week, Piers Morgan dubbed them, quote, Pop's biggest wallies. A few months later, they announced that not only were they retiring, but they were removing their music from public sale. The music magazine Select described it as the last grand gesture, the most heroic act of public self-destruction in the history of pop. After the KLF, they launched the K Foundation, which was a fund set up for struggling artists. However, they decided that this cash could instead be used for a much bolder statement. Their first idea was to take out $1 million, or £1,000,000 in cash, and place it in an art gallery. They wanted it nailed to the wall of the Tate Gallery in Liverpool and called 1995 K Foundation Bequest to the Nation. This would be on display at the gallery for 10 years. But possibly for security reasons, the Tate Gallery rejected this proposal. A second idea was to hire Bankside Power Station and do something that nobody had ever done before. They thought of hiring it as a bonfire venue, where all of the money would be burnt. But they thought that was too extravagant. Instead, they would go out into a remote island in Scotland and burn it there. They brought along a filmmaker too because they didn't get video evidence of what they were doing. Nobody would believe them. But taking £1 million out of the bank is not something your average bank would agree to. In fact, they might not even have that amount of cash inside. What the KLF did was hire a security company to get them this cash. So they got a plane out to the island of Jura in Scotland, and on August 23, 1994, Drummond and Cauty filmed themselves burning 1 million British pounds, which was the bulk of the money they earned in music sales. They took handfuls of 50 quid bills and threw them into a fire. And 1 million pounds is not the same value as $1 million. It's more than that, and this is over 20 years ago, or about 20 years ago. In fact, because of inflation, the £1 million they burned in 1994 would be the equivalent of £2 million today, or about $2.5 million. When news got out about what they had done, they realized that they were no longer looked at as these happy-go-lucky pranksters. People were angry. The band's manager was answering calls all day, all coming from people who were angry that they didn't spend it on kidney machines, children's hospitals, or their mortgages. Because of their initial plans to have it in an art gallery, the burning of this million was seen as performance art or making a statement of the value we place on money. Others thought it was simply attention-seeking of the highest possible order. They did an interview on Irish TV and were simply asked the question on everyone's mind, why? Bill responds with, there was a lot of reasons why, and we're still discovering the reasons every day. Jimmy came up with the best reason yesterday though. Jimmy then responds with, I was watching Top of the Pops, a music show, with my kids, and Michael Jackson video came on for his hit, and I just thought we burnt it because we'd never be as talented as Michael Jackson. Bill then interjects, we haven't come up with a definitive reason as to why we did it. They're then asked if it's a rejection of capitalism and money. Bill's response was, some days it's that, but it's not really. We could have done with the money. We wanted the money, but we wanted to burn it more. There were some awkward laughs in the audience. Things got really tense when they were asked why they didn't give it to charity. Jimmy replies, we're not a charitable organization. We thought that there's plenty of people who want to give money to charity. We wanted to do something that we found more interesting with the money. With this statement, they completely lost the audience. Bill somewhat brings them back when he says, if we had gone and spent the money on swimming pools and Rolls Royces, I don't think people would be upset. It's because we burnt it. The show then takes some comments from the audience. Some argued that it did make a bold statement about the power of money, Another person said that it's simply their money and they can do what they want with it. But one person may have possibly cut through all of their BS. He said, "The reason why you did this is because you've got egos that could no longer be satisfied in the music industry, and you wanted a way to become something big, and to be the first people to burn £1 million will get you into history." Bill admits that having egos was definitely a part of it, but they claim that the fact that they did it out in the Scottish countryside rather than some extravagant place in the middle of London was a sign that it wasn't all about their ego. As the years went on, they stayed true to their word. The KLF had retired. Bill and Jimmy did bits and pieces here and there, but were basically back in obscurity where they felt that they belonged. However, as time went on, the fact that they burned £1 million continued to linger in their mind. In 2004, 10 years after the incident, Bill was interviewed by the BBC and was asked if he regretted it. He responded, "Of course I regret it. Who wouldn't? My children especially regret it, but I don't regret it all the time. I remember once, one of my children came home from school and said, 'Somebody told me in the playground that you once burned £100. Is it true?' I said, 'I wish that was true.'" And in 2017, there was a reunion where Bill and Jimmy temporarily reunited as the Justified Ancients of Mumu. They hosted a 3-day event in Liverpool that culminated in a debate on why did the K Foundation burn £1 million, where journalists and commentators explained why they might have done it. After the event, the KLF put out black and white posters all across Liverpool explaining why they did it. They came to a monumental Zen moment as to why this all happened and settled things once and for all. And finally, they had an answer that would satisfy the people who were so angry at them back in the 90s. The poster read, "Why? Because we are effing stupid and ran out of ideas. Now we need the money back." Make sure to subscribe for more.